G'day legends, I hope that you are having a fantastic day and so far that you are having a fantastic week. Now I have to apologise for not being as consistent as I would like. I am travelling around America. Yesterday I did plan to make a video, but Gus and I went out for a very long ride and I was incredibly tired afterwards. But we are going to catch up on everything that has happened, and of course the main meat of the video, the main news is what Trump is doing and his changes in the outlook on the Ukrainian war. The ultimatum given to the Kremlin, although we have seen ultimatums come and go, as well as the biggest part is Europe buying military items off America to send into Ukraine. But we'll have a look because Europe isn't exactly super happy about this either. So we'll go over all of that, and in that I'm going to actually go over my conclusion first. And you know me, I'm going to pour some cold water on this because this again is being trumped up as another wonder weapon. And how many of these have we seen come and go? And people love to talk about these systems, but how long is it going to take for these systems to actually enter? And when I say a system enter, that doesn't mean the physical item be there. Where's the crew coming from for this? If you go from 4 systems to a dozen systems, who's filling that? When we know people are getting ripped off these systems to other non-frontline areas to go onto the front line. So we'll go over all of that as well, talk about Trump's tariffs. But we'll start on the maps. That'll be quick, and then we'll get into all of this. So here is Ukraine in the center of your screen. Of course, the capital of Kyiv. The red area is occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. The red check that you'll see on this map, this is ground that Russia has made over the past 24 hours. So let's have a look here. And what we have is some areas that are filling in. Now, Bakhmut finally showing under control. Now, Bakhmut, this has been under control for some time, but this is at least catching up on some fronts. We'll show you a couple of geolocations in here too and some other maps, but let's look at the month so far. So we're at mid-July, and what we have is that Russia has occupied some 339 kilometer squares, at least according to the deep state map, which is likely holding back a few weeks to sometimes well over a month on some areas. But even by these numbers, it's looking like it will be a larger month than the previous month of June. And that tells us a lot about momentum and pace on the battlefield. And what that tells us is how the command and back into the politicians in Russia may be seeing the future of this war as well. So let's come down around Mariupol and have a look. We see at Malinivka more Russian advancement in here according to the Ukrainian deep state map. I also then have a geolocation to show you here. Now this was actually a screenshot of yesterday's video, and the map has now updated to show this. So we can confirm those flags going up, and in this video here there is multiple flags going up all over the place in this sector. So we know in Malinivka it's been hit, and then multiple flags going up over different areas. This map has now shown this. Still doesn't show to the north as far as I believe that it is, but it is showing some movements. Now let's move up in and around Velika Novosilka. Now we can see ground being made to the north into Novohatsky as well. Still a lot of grey zone from Myrne down to Ferivkia. We see Oleksivkia, this area coming under further control. In my opinion, that's not a new update. In my opinion, this is still far behind where that front line is actually sitting. Then we'll come to Pokrovsk. Now, the 50-day ultimatum that Trump has put out, we will see a lot more pushing on Pokrovsk, depending if the Kremlin are actually going to take into account the 50 days at all or see it as just another ultimatum. Let's have a look at this bit of ground being made in Razine. We can see just a movement out here, small movement to some 1.7 kilometers. But what this is doing is further building that northeastern flank of Pokrovsk. That it was the eastern flank, and now it's slowly becoming the northern flank as that envelopment builds. So we have a few other maps showing movement in and around here, and this is from Iron Dispatch. Now, Iron Dispatch, he shows that in between these two areas is coming under control as well, and on the north. Now, what we need to look at on this map too is look at where the grey zone is shifting. So see in the center here, we can step back to then yesterday, and we see that this grey zone has moved out, and then to today, that is then getting built on and building on previous gains being made, and that continual grind forward and pressure. Now we see this is the same area, but just to the north on this front too, we have then Pankivka. So Pankivka and Make just in here, that is showing that another defensive position has come under control, and movement breaking into Pankivka. So if this map is correct, I should add Syriac map hasn't given any updates today, some 3.5 kilometers advancement. Now, come across into Toretsk, and we do definitely see a lot of movement here that is still not shown on this map. So I have a couple of geolocations here to show you. We're just going to jump around just a little bit. So we have just to the north of Petrivka or south of Sherbinkiv, we have to 1.5 kilometers away. We saw yesterday this flag go up. Now, I believe this flag here by the Russian forces, this is the flag of the Trans-Baikal region shown here. So confirmation of presence of forces there yesterday, and then today we see this geolocation here just further north a little bit. So it's just up in this sector right in here. I actually cropped out on accident how far that is away, some 2.1-ish kilometers. And we then see another geolocation of, in this case, a Russian flag and unit flag going up here, confirming further movement as we do see more movement being made around Donetsk. We know that was very liquid for some time. So they are the updates that we do have for you today. I did do these updates the other day from the 13th. Yes, sorry. I can get a little bit out of whack due to the time zone of when I'm seeing some stuff and when other bits and pieces are then coming through. So Surak Maps, I believe he'll have a lot of map updates in the coming days. So Trump, I'll give it a week. I'll give it a week max until NAFO say that Trump is once again an agent of the Kremlin, okay? What he wants is he wants an end to the war, and he wants America first. That's the lens you have to put a lot of this through. But we also need to take into account the reality on the battlefield as well, that regardless of how much you ignore it, if there is a negotiation taking place, you will not be able to ignore it. And Trump won't ignore it given the type of realist leader that he is. So what we're going to do is go over my conclusion first and then what has been said, because I believe at this point a lot of you guys have probably seen what is being said. 50-day ultimatum to the Kremlin, more long-range weapons to Ukraine, more air defense, and secondary tariffs on that 50 days, okay? But what I see is that this is being significantly overhyped. It's another wonder weapon being promised. It's not that this is nothing. It's not that. That's not the case. But it is not a sledgehammer. It is not a reversal of the situation we are seeing unfold on the front line. Now, the biggest problem I see in this, nothing being said or being delivered, nothing in that is actually addressing the situation at the front line. Nothing. It's addressing strategic issues and situation. Okay, so it's addressing strategic strikes as far as air defense and potentially long-range strike capability. Great. But it's not at all actually assessing anything on the frontline battlefield as far as regaining or stabilizing territory, or then the massive manpower issues. And at the end of the day, that this is a ground war on the battlefield, that strategic level stuff from air defense to long range strikes, that still influences that very, very front line. But in the attritional nature of war like this, it goes again into that who's operating the system. Putin, I believe that he will improve his position on the battlefield in 50 days. He's improved it today from 50 days prior, and from 50 days prior again, it is improving. And I believe that is how they're seeing it. And I think given the attritional nature, given areas that are getting enveloped, that the Kremlin smell blood in the water. Now, is it going to be a 10,000 kilometre squares different 50 days? No. Likely no, but will it be an improved position? Yeah, and your terms then can change. But 50 days is still a very long time. It's almost 2 months. What if we do see a significant breakthrough or something happen then? It can happen. What actually happens then? Trump, he has set a deadline here for secondary sanctions, tariffs, whatever you'd like to call it. Thing is, Putin can also sort of play his cards and leverage off this because Trump wants to save face. The biggest thing being in America now from when I was 2 years ago, I saw Trump flags everywhere, Trump hats everywhere, Trump stickers. I'm not bullshitting you. I have not seen a single bit of Trump merch at the time I've been here. This Epstein thing, I think, has ruined the entire presidency, and I think absolutely has enough for distrust in the elites on both sides of the aisle massively, unless you're a Ben Shapiro or that dude with the big face who looks like a cookie man, whatever his name is, who just, now trust the elites. Fucking very huge. But Trump also wants to save face. He wants to actually do an election promise of ending the war. But Putin knows too of like, well, how realistic is it that you are going to tariff countries like China, like India, like Brazil, like further European states to not only 30%, but much, much more than this too. Once 50 days is up, what if Putin says just no, we're continuing it? Or what if the offer is, yeah, that's fine, Trump, but the offer is still the same as what we've had for a number of years now of those oblasts and NATO. It also doesn't address any of manufacturing issues. Last week, we were told 25% of Patriot missile interceptors, the 25% of the interceptors, that's all that is there for the Pentagon's military plans. Okay, so it doesn't come into account of that problem also. It doesn't address thousands of Garand drones or FABs. You're not using Patriot for that at all. So it doesn't address that. It doesn't address these FABs being used tactical and strategically, as well as Garands being used tactically and strategically, being like on the battlefield and then into cities. So it doesn't address that at all, that is what is most moving the battlefield as far as aerial asset. And there is still some doubt if the US is willing to actually impose secondary tariffs, so 100%, on countries simply working with Russia, being India, China, Brazil, whoever else. That this is a very, very big move. And you also need to take into account the impact this will have on the future of the US dollar as well. I know Trump is wanting to pull these countries back from BRICS and all this and bring into the orbit and keep this USD hegemony. But again, it's a dangerous game that is getting played. And people saying, well, Ukraine will just bomb Moscow. Okay, if this happens, well, good luck bringing Putin to the table in 50 days at all. There's this game of cat and mouse, of carrot and stick, and in my opinion, nothing in this is really addressing core issues. And the way I see it is the core issues is still the front line and secondary strategic actions. Financial Times, Washington Post, they cite anonymous sources familiar with a call reporting that Trump had encouraged Zelensky to strike deeper into Russia to increase their pressure on Putin. Now, there's a lot of pushback on this article today. Trump wanted to, quote, make them feel pain, at least according to this phone call. And Zelensky said Ukraine could hit cities if the US supplied the weapons. Now, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has said the Financial Times is notorious for taking words wildly out of context to get clicks because their paper is dying. President Trump is merely asking a question, not encouraging further killing. He's working tirelessly to stop the killing and end this war. Now, again, what is being spoken about is this, you increase the war, you escalate to de-escalate. Now, this is somewhat what is occurring, but nothing being supplied in this is to win the war. The hope in this supply is to increase the costs for Putin to such a degree that eventually he makes some concession. And a Tomahawk is no exception to this. A Tomahawk is not going to move the front line. It's not going to be used in that way. It's going to increase the cost, hoping that Putin comes to the table. But there's somewhat of an acceptance in this strategy of, well, we're losing the war on the battlefield. We just need to increase cost, but we're not going to return that territory. None of this is going to return territory unless everything starts collapsing. Another thing which is just not being spoken of at all is the timeframes on these systems. 50-day ultimatum until secondary tariffs go in place. These systems, a lot of these, are not going to enter the battlefield or enter the fold as much. They may be physically there, but making such a difference in that time, I have doubts about it. Tomahawk missiles, you're talking minimum of multiple months. And who is operating all of these systems? Ukrainian Air Force, other Ukrainian non-frontline units, they, for months, we've heard complaints of guys being pulled out of these to be sent into the infantry to try and hold the line. And even those systems that are operating, such as the Patriots, if you're going from a few to over a dozen to 20, whatever, you're going to need 3, 4, 5 times the operators. And those operators, it takes a lot of time. Let's look at what Tatarigami UA has said about this. Unless there is more beyond what has already been announced, it's unlikely to make any meaningful impression on the Kremlin. It doesn't come across as a strong deterrent in any way. Regarding President Trump's statement about 17 Patriot batteries, I have serious doubts. Not just because of the number, but mostly because of the interceptors. The depletion of interceptors is a much more serious problem than the batteries themselves. Exactly like we've seen spoken about of Patriots previously. Of course, a lot of these have been used up in Ukraine through to the Middle East. And it's the same game-changing rhetoric we have heard for years. Lavrov, of course, Russia's foreign minister, has spoken about the 50-day timeline. Certainly would like to understand what is behind the statement about 50 days earlier. There were also deadlines of 24 hours and of 100 days. We've seen it all and really would like to understand the motivation of the US president. Lavrov noted enormous pressure on Trump, saying it is clear that he's under enormous, I would say shameless pressure by the European Union and NATO's current leadership, which recklessly supports Zelensky's demands and continues to flood it with modern weapons, including offensive ones at the greater and greater damage to taxpayers in Western countries. And there is a lot of pressure on Trump. There's a lot of pressure from other NATO countries. He's putting a lot of pressure on them too. And there's a lot of internal pressure on Trump as well. The drain the swamp has lifted the swamp at this point in time. And what we do see, in my opinion, is we see Trump caving to internal pressures. And the biggest example of this is, of course, with a legitimate pedo island, which is now being swept under the rug after saying that that is all going to come out. And we know there's a lot of pressure here, and we will see how the future will then be shaped by that as well, of maybe some areas behind the scenes that we are not seeing. Taurus, long-range cruise missile, similar to a Storm Shadow Scalp. Well, it doesn't look like it is coming. Again, this rhetoric versus reality that I speak of. Now, the story has said we only have 6 left in Germany. He's speaking of Patriot systems here, that we would definitely can't give more. But we're looking at maybe buying Patriots from the US to give to Ukraine. He said Germany would not deliver long-range Taurus missiles to Ukraine despite a wave of recent Russian air attacks and renewed requests from Kyiv. So it doesn't look like the Taurus is going in. And just like we've said, even if the Taurus got signed off right now, it's going to take a number of months until they're in the air. Now, let's speak about and have a look at Trump talking about then the Patriot and Intercept. So we're giving everything.
It's a full complement with the batteries. Well, we're going to have some come very soon, within days actually. A couple of the countries that have Patriots are going to swap over and will replace the Patriots with the ones they have. We have one country that has 17 Patriots getting ready to be shipped. They're not going to need any for that. So we're going to work with where the 17 will go.
So it's hard to know if the 17 is talking about batteries. I do not believe that it is, or talking about a complete system. Could be 17 different items within that. But more Patriots are going to Ukraine within the coming days. But what I've spoken about before, that will have an impact on, of course, the ballistic cruise missiles. But things like the Garans, if you go to 1,000 Garans a day, you're not going to be starting to fire these interceptors. And the interceptors, again, they are going to be the issue with this. Now, where Trump has had a win in this is he's basically saying, well, we're not having support, but Europe is going to continue your support Ukraine, but they are going to be paying for it. We know Trump, he has been very concerned about the amount of money that this war is costing the US.
It was good they had stopped Iran from trying to bomb.
So he speaks about Iran at the beginning, ignore that.
And we did it very successfully.
And we make the best equipment, the best missiles, the best of everything. The European nations know that. And we made a deal today, and I'm going to have Mark speak about it, but we made a deal today where we are going to be sending them weapons and they're going to be paying for them.
So the Europeans are buying US weapons, the Europeans are paying for them, and then the Europeans can send those to Ukraine if they would like.
The United States will not be having any payment made.
US will not be having any payment made.
We're not buying it, but we will manufacture it and they're going to be paying for it.
Our last meeting of the month was very successful and they agreed to 5%.
So the US is the real winner in this. They can extend billions and billions of dollars. It helps their manufacturing base, helps jobs, all of this to purchase those weapon systems. And we do see Karen Callas isn't too happy about this, speaking at the Council of the European Union.
If we pay for these weapons, it's our support.
So it's not that it's American support. If we're paying, it's our support.
So it's European support. And we are doing as much as we can to help Ukraine, and therefore the call is that everybody would do the same. It's, if you promise to give the weapons but say that somebody else is going to pay for it, it's not really given by you, is it?
So pushing back that it's not really given by you, is it, Trump? If you're promising the weapons but it's paid for by someone else, and the US will leave a very large vacuum here. The amount of funding the US has given, the amount of supply, all of this, and I don't know what the cost of the weapons is actually going to be for export as well. It may be significantly higher. But again, everyone's loving to talk about these systems, but I would be more like those that are saying this is game changing. If it came out and said the US is giving 5,000 Bradleys, 1,000 Abrams, training for that, blah, 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 XXX, then I'd go, yeah, look, this is a real, but the other bits and pieces, I'm like, yeah, it'll increase, it'll hit some airfields, it'll maybe hit Moscow, it may hit this or that. Is it going to have significant impact on that movement on the front line and the attrition of infantry at the front line? In my opinion, no. Now, secondary tariffs. This is something you and I have spoken about a lot for some time. And this is that 50-day ultimatum and that threat of severe tariffs against Russia. But it's not against Russia. It's against countries that work with Russia, which is a huge breach of other nations' sovereignty and independence. What liberal democracies in the rules-based order are meant to hold as a number one priority, at least when it suits. But he says about the Russians that we are very unhappy with them. And he's had a lot of comments about how unhappy he is with Putin. And we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. What if, though, Putin leverages and just goes, oh, that 50 days is like, it'll either embarrass you again, Trump, or you can accept the same deal that has been in place. Now, in 50 days, though, also, the Russian summer offensive will likely be nearing an end. So maybe this will bring Putin to the table if he can't gain as much as he thought that he could this year. We'll see. Trump says tariffs at about 100%. You know what that means. But today we're going to talk about something else. And he spoke of powerful secondary tariffs, and not only further tariffs and sanctions against Russia, but secondary tariffs against China and India and Brazil. So your items are going to be tariffed if you are still doing trade with Russia. And we've spoken about how this can backfire because especially China is the number one competitor to the US, and they are wanting to reduce US power and reliance on the US as well. And we never know the off-ramp that may be delivered sooner rather than later. And of course, these are BRICS nations, huge populations, massive growing economies in tech and agriculture and all of that. So we will see. And we will see how serious is Trump around with India, Brazil, countries that work with the US. Of course, China works with the US massively, but is a huge competitor and a strategic competition too. Is Trump really willing to do this? And as I said in the video yesterday, well, those secondary items being bought that have originated in Russia gets maybe sent to India, refined in India, and then who's buying it? Maybe some countries that are now purchasing US equipment, are they going to be then further tariffed? He speaks further on this here with Mr. Mark Ruth. Of how far are you willing to go?
In what?
Don't ask me a question like that. How far?
And he says, don't ask me a question like that. Like, how far are you willing to go? And this has always been the question. And this goes back to my conclusion of what then? In my conclusion, when I said, what if Putin says no? Or he arrives at the same terms, and you've known my terms for 2 years, Trump. What if he says no? What then? Okay. Can the manufacturing base keep up with interceptors? Okay. Is Europe willing to plug that hole of the US with billions of dollars leaving? Okay. And also, how far are you willing to go if in this 50 days or after this 50 days, are you willing to have secondary actions on these other nations? Are you willing to do that? Okay, maybe you're willing to do that. That's gone into place. Imagine this all goes perfectly, that Europe is spending tens of billions on weapons for Ukraine, secondary tariffs going on other nations, and the front line continues moving. What then? How far are you willing to go? And this has always been my question, is all the rhetoric and all the planning has been based on a Ukrainian victory, and a Ukrainian victory that will be delivered through a Russian failure. That it will be the economy or the military or the whatever will fail, or the political system. What if those aren't delivered to you on a silver platter and that then isn't there? And this is, once again, in my opinion, basing a Ukrainian victory or a walking away with the best possible outcome, but relying on a Russian failure and concession. What if this just doesn't have that effect? What is the plan then? Yes, this may be the priority plan number one, but I just don't think that anyone's thought about priority plan number two. If we see a breakthrough on the front line, or we see this doesn't have the effect, or it has the same effect as all the other wonder weapons that have been delivered. Remember when people were thinking F-16s would fly over Moscow, or we had military analysts saying that Leopards and Abrams would just roll through the front line? The problem is mass. The problem has always been mass in this war. That is the crux of every issue, is numeracy. How many systems can you deliver? People are talking today of 18 ATACMS. Like, oh my God, 18 ATACMS are going to be fired at full range. 18 is fuck all. Of apparently 20 that are left, how many air defense interceptors are you really going to have? How many? And the biggest impact has just been the value of how many men do you have at the front. We know manufacturing bases are struggling. We know Ukraine's conscription to recruitment's gone, but conscription is struggling as well, and moving people to the front line from these specialty units as well. I don't see that this is addressing the core issues. It doesn't address mass. It doesn't address battlefield frontline, which I guess those are not mutually exclusive. And that's not addressing the systems I see that are making the bigger difference as far as FABs and Garants. What happens if Russia is able to, imagine if these Patriots intercept every single Iskander, which won't happen, but imagine they intercept every single Iskander, every single Kaliber, every single fucking Kinzhal. Imagine, okay, it's got 100% interception rate. It'll be claimed anyway. But what if then there's 1,000 Garans in the air that can then just target these Patriots on the ground? Because nothing is being done around actually taking them down. Or what if Russia's missile campaign and drone campaign, what if every Garan and every missile in the air is intercepted and downed? Every single one of them. Well, then do they just stop their strategic missile bombing campaign and just focus all assets on the front line? What then? That's the problem with mass. that it goes back to the old thing of a V8 if there's no replacement for displacement. And tech doesn't replace mass once you've got a protracted war, once you start with the attritional aspect. Legends, hope that you are having a fantastic day. I won't speak to you tomorrow. I've got an 8.5 hour drive, which will, of course, increase because Lily will want photos every half an hour. Anyway, have a great time, and I will speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Oh, my God, I'm a fucking idiot. I'll speak to you on Thursday. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.